In this episode, we talk about the Himalayan High Altitude Atmospheric and Climate Research Center, which has the ability to reshape how we study climate. We also talk about a series of devastating air attacks launched by Russia on Ukraine and US President Donald Trump's reaction to it. But first, we talk about the Pahalgam terror attack and India's response to the same. Hi, I am Niharika Nanda, and you are listening to Three Things, the Indian Express news show. On 22nd April, 26 people were killed and several others were injured in a terrorist attack in South Kashmir's Pahalgam. The terrorists opened fire at tourists in Baisaran and off-the-road meadow in Pahalgam. This was the deadliest terror attack on civilians in India since the 26/11 Mumbai attacks. Underlining the cross-border linkages of the attack, India has responded with strict measures. The Indus Waters Treaty has been put on hold. Visas granted to Pakistan nationals under a SARC scheme have been cancelled and people have been directed to leave within 48 hours. And the Atari-Wagha border has been shut down. To learn more about the developments that have taken place since the attack and how they will impact the Indo-Pakistan ties, we have the Indian Express's Deeptiman Tiwary joining us in this segment. So Deeptiman, it's been 3 days since the attack. At this point, have we found out anything about the militants, who they were or their whereabouts?
What we know so far is that it is suspected that there are in all 5 terrorists who launched that attack, killing tourists at the Baisaran Meadow in Pahalgam. 3 of them are suspected to be foreign terrorists, which is basically terrorists from Pakistan. And 2 of them could be local terrorists from Kashmir. This is what we know of the attackers as of now. What we also know that they have fled to higher reaches of Pir Panjal, which are thick jungles, and there is a coordinated search operation and combing of the jungles which is being done by the Indian Army and paramilitary forces and the Jammu and Kashmir police.
And the responsibility for the attack has been claimed by the Resistance Front, also known as the TRF. What do we know about this organization and its relations to the Lashkar-e-Taiba?
See, the Kashmir Resistance Force is basically a front of the Lashkar-e-Taiba. It was sort of propped up after the August 5, 2019 decisions and abrogation of Article 370. And basically it was to give sort of an appearance of terrorism which is happening in the valley, a local flavor to it, and saying that this is a local resistance or local rebellion against decisions that India had taken. So this sort of a front was, prepared by Lashkar-e-Taiba, but all the people in this front are basically Lashkar-e-Taiba operatives, and it is nothing but a proxy of the Lashkar-e-Taiba.
And Deeptiman, in response to the attack, what are the measures that have been taken by the Indian government?
Yeah, India has already, kept the Indus Water Treaty in abeyance, saying that until Pakistan stops, terrorism on Indian soil, this treaty is going to be abeyance. So it basically means that it is going to be indefinite. It is also, closed all people-to-people exchanges which happen on the borders. And the Atari-Wagha border has been closed. From India's missions, all the defense attaches have been declared persona non grata and sent back to Pakistan. All the visas have been cancelled, and people who are here in India from Pakistan have been told to leave by 1st of May. So these are some of the measures that India has taken in response to the Pahalgam terror attacks.
Deeptiman, over the years, we have seen that Jammu and Kashmir has had a heavy military presence. And yet it is being said that this attack shows an intelligence failure and security neglect.
All attacks are basically intelligence failures. If an attack has happened, it has happened because we didn't know about it. If we knew about it, we would have stopped it. We have to also remember that we do not get to know about intelligence successes because they end up preventing attacks. So we only come to know about intelligence failures. All the operations that happen, all the terrorists who are killed or apprehended are actually based on good intelligence inputs. So, one could say that this is an intelligence failure, but so are almost all the attacks. And in a conflict zone like Kashmir, where there is continuous infiltration from across the border and the security situation is always in a high tension mode. These attacks do happen sometimes. They are extremely unfortunate, and one can only say in hindsight that there should have been better security preparations. Probably if at that Basaran meadow there was a presence of security force personnel, given how many number of tourists were visiting it, it would have been difficult to carry out such an attack. Yeah, but these are all with the benefit of hindsight, and I'm sure that the security establishment is sitting and analyzing what has gone wrong, what were the gaps which were left because of which this attack has taken place, and whether they paid enough attention to the fact that even tourists could be attacked. Having said that, let's also remember that in the history of Kashmir conflict, it has been very rare for tourists to be targeted by terrorists. There have been incidents few and far between here and there over the past 3 decades, but there have been very few. So probably some sort of complacency in the security establishment was there that, tourists would not be attacked. Also, when you're trying to push a sort of a sense of normalcy and you're trying to push tourism a lot, a very heavy security presence can deter a lot of tourism activity. So all of these things are factors I'm sure the security establishment will analyze and see what went wrong where.
And what kind of a role do locals play in providing intelligence-related information to the military?
Yeah, so in intelligence gathering, both technical intelligence, which is, say, interception of phones or interception of satellite communication, is very, very important. But most important is human intelligence. What is human intelligence? It is simply that, you have friends among the public who will tell you if a suspicious person is moving around in the higher reaches of the valley. And they will tell security forces that such and such person is moving around, and then the security forces go and intercept them and neutralize them. So this is a very, very important part of intelligence gathering, and security forces have been building such networks. Sometimes these human intelligence networks do not give the results that you're expecting. Sometimes they do. When they do, you have successful operations. When they don't, or sometimes people do not encounter such things, or people are also scared. So in those times, things can become difficult, or sometimes people do not trust the security forces, or there is an ill will. So those times, human intelligence can suffer. So this is all part of the game in a conflict zone.
And Deeptiman, sometime back you had written a piece where you had talked about the fact that India has been working on strengthening its border security. So talk about the plans that were in the pipeline.
See, the only way that we can minimize damage to us is by having a robust counter-infiltration grid, which is building robust fences along the line of control and the international border, and integrating it with technology to make it stronger and to make it breach-free. But, this has been a work in progress. A lot of steps have been taken in the past decade or so, where a lot of technology has been experimented with to plug vulnerable areas on the international border and the line of control. But a lot remains to be done in this field. There has been a project called Comprehensive Integrated Border Management System, which basically integrates modern state-of-the-art technologies such as thermal imaging cameras, high-resolution cameras, radar systems, aerial surveillance, etc., with the fencing system, and tries to plug vulnerable areas and gaps. But these are still in experimental phase and are being tried and tested. It will take some time for things to be implemented on the ground.
Right. And Deeptiman, Prime Minister Narendra Modi was on a trip to Saudi Arabia. But after the attack, he cut his trip short, came back, and yesterday in Bihar, he also delivered a speech where he talked about the attack. So tell us, what did he have to say?
So obviously the Prime Minister has made it very clear that some very, very serious retribution is awaiting the perpetrators of the attack and those who sponsored this attack, who may be sitting across the border. So Prime Minister has made his intentions very, very clear. We don't yet know that militarily what the government is going to do on this front, but the Prime Minister has made it very clear that nobody is going to be spared.
Today, from the soil of Bihar, I say to the whole world, India will identify, track, and punish every terrorist and their backers. We will pursue them to the ends of the earth. India's spirit will never be broken by terrorism. Terrorism will not go unpunished. Every effort will be made to ensure that justice is done. The entire nation is firm in this resolve.
And now that India has taken certain strict measures, Pakistan has also responded to them by closing down its airspace. Can you talk about the other ways in which Pakistan has responded?
Yes, Pakistan has suspended the Simla Agreement, which is one of the major things that has happened. So, yes, it was only expected that Pakistan would also respond in a diplomatic measures to what steps that India has taken. But let's remember that it is the Simla Agreement which gave us the LOC, and Pakistan has been violating Simla Agreement since the late 80s in Jammu and Kashmir.
Right. And how do we see the relationship between the two nations going ahead from here?
See, this is a deliberate provocation from Pakistan, which is only going to ratchet up the tension between India and Pakistan. Especially from India, revocation of the Indus Water Treaty is a very, very serious step, which is going to put a lot of pressure on Pakistan, because sort of the Indus Water Treaty is the lifeline of Pakistan, because all the water is actually flowing from Kashmir into Pakistan. So any disturbance on that could starve Pakistan of water. However, its implications will be medium term, because, diverting water for our own irrigation or building dams will take their own time. So in times to come, we could see a rising tension between India and Pakistan.
And now, shifting focus to Jammu and Kashmir's Udhampur, where India has just inaugurated a facility that could reshape how we study the climate. In the hills of Udhampur, nestled in the clouds, a white shipping container marks the launch of India's first dedicated atmospheric station to study a little-known but crucial element of how clouds form and turn into rain. This is the Himalayan High-Altitude Atmospheric and Climate Research Centre, set up by the Central University of Jammu in collaboration with the Ministry of Earth Sciences. The facility is designed to study ice nucleating particles, or INPs, which are rare microscopic elements in the atmosphere.
So basically, if water goes below 0 degrees centigrade, our experience says it freezes into ice, isn't it?
This is the Indian Express's Amitabh Sinha, who covered the story for the paper.
In clouds, it doesn't happen. And it doesn't happen because of the absence of these what are known as ice nucleating particles. So basically what happens is, in the clouds, water droplets remain in liquid form for much lower temperatures, even at minus 35 degrees or almost like 40 degrees in the negative. Water remains in the liquid form. And the reason they are able to remain in liquid form, and that's called supercooled liquid, is because the conversion of liquid droplets into ice crystals again requires a different set of particles. You need some surfaces on which these can solidify into ice crystals. And these surfaces are what we call the ice nucleating particles. Again, sort of dust, even pollen grains, some sort of bacteria as well. So both, biological as well as chemical particles, they can offer themselves to become the surfaces on which the ice crystal formation can take place.
Now, Amitabh tells us, while we understand the broader mechanisms of rainfall, this particular area of how and when water droplets freeze inside clouds has remained a scientific blind spot. To further understand why we need a sophisticated climate monitoring station and its implications, my colleague Ichha Sharma talks to Amitabh.
Amitabh, we've had weather stations before. So can you tell us what makes this one different? Like, why is this setup in Udhampur so important for India and also climate science?
So, yes, you are right. We have had weather stations from long time. We have weather stations all over the country, and we have all kinds of weather stations. But this is the first of its kind monitoring station in India. A couple of things that makes this particular station a little special. One, it is located in a place in Jammu and Kashmir, in the high altitudes of Jammu and Kashmir, where traditionally there has been a data gap. We do not have a very good monitoring network in Jammu and Kashmir. So while we have, weather stations all over the country, in the Himalayas, we don't have that dense a network. So it fulfills a data gap. That is one. And two, this one will facilitate a kind of study which none of our other monitoring stations is equipped to do. And that is the study of what are known as ice nucleating particles. Now, they are called INPs. This is about studying of cloud formation. We know a lot about cloud formation, but there are particular aspects of it which are not fully understood, not just in India, globally. And globally, there is a lot of research happening on this particular area.
Right. And you've mentioned that the big focus here is on studying how clouds turn into rain or snow. But isn't that something we already know? So what exactly are we trying to uncover now?
So basically, this study is about how the presence of these ice nucleating particles, how these facilitate rainfall and the formation of rain in the clouds. So the exact mechanism about these ice nucleating particles is something that is not very well understood, and it's a research that, as I said, is happening across the world. So we'll now also be participating in that research, and this is something that no other station in India currently does, this particular aspect. And there are more things as well. Now it's a more sophisticated monitoring station. Some of the equipment that are installed here are really world class. So a combination of these things, why this particular station has generated some interest. It will facilitate studies of Himalayan ecosystem, studies of the climate in the Himalayas. Again, something which is understudied subject in India, considering that we have long Himalayan ranges, and these are one of the very important climate hotspots. We don't have not just a network of monitoring stations, but also the kind of studies that are required to understand how climate change is impacting the Himalayan ecosystem, which is a very fragile ecosystem. So those kind of studies will get facilitated by this particular station. And that's why this is, special and important.
But also, why Udhampur? Like, what makes it unique for this kind of cloud interaction study?
Right. So one of the main things that this station is going to study, as we have discussed, is about the dynamics of cloud formation. So what you have to observe is you have to observe the clouds very closely. And the one way to study it is to put equipment on an aircraft and send it into the clouds to make the observations and see how things and observe the processes but that's not a very feasible long-term observation. You can only do limited kind of things with that. The other thing can be that you locate your laboratories in a place where clouds are easily accessible, and that's what the location of Udhampur does. This particular location is about 2,250 meters above sea level, but more importantly, this is a place where you have clouds, visible at very low levels, almost sometimes, clouds coming in almost in the laboratories. A few places across where these kind of things happen. And a similar location is in Mahabaleshwar, for example, in Maharashtra. It's a very popular tourist destination. It's not very high. It's just about 1,300, 1,400 meters above sea level. But that's another place where, you have clouds that form at very low levels, and clouds almost, sometimes you are walking or driving into the clouds. So that's another place where this kind of study is easy to carry out.
And Amitabh, you explained earlier that for faster and heavier precipitation, water droplets must freeze into ice crystals. So where do these ice nucleating particles, or INPs, come into the picture? Like, how do they change what's happening inside a cloud?
So what happens is, left to itself, water in the liquid form in the cloud would take it much longer to come down in the form of rain, right? compared to when there are conditions in which ice crystal formation takes place. Now, once this process takes place, once the water droplets are able to become ice crystals, the process of precipitation gets fast forwarded because ice crystals are much heavier and they come down in the form of rain at a much earlier than would have been possible in the absence of ice crystals. So without these INPs or the ice nucleating particles, you still have rainfall, but that would be sort of a delayed rainfall. The water droplets would take much longer time to come down and probably would have lesser rain. These ice nucleating particles, they facilitate this entire precipitation process. You have rains that happen much earlier. Also, probably you have more rains. So this is the importance of the ice nucleating particles.
And you also mentioned that these particles can be as tiny as dust or pollen, but that they can trigger huge weather events. So can you tell us how scientists even detect or measure something so small and scattered?
This particular process, not every particle in the atmosphere can act as an ice nucleating particle. There are certain characteristics to these. Only certain kinds of particles can initiate this kind of process. And this is what scientists are trying to study. At these locations, what is the concentration of the INPs as against other sort of particles present? And these, what exactly leads to the formation of ice crystals? And actually this process, as I said, is not very well understood. But if scientists are able to exactly understand this process, then it helps in a lot of things. It helps in weather modeling. It helps in your rain forecast, how it improves your forecast of the rain. It improves forecasts for extreme rainfall events and those kind of things. It also helps your overall modeling for cloud dynamics. So that is where this INPs and the study of INPs become important.
Also, can this facility help us make better predictions during, say, events like cloud bursts or even flash floods in the region?
Exactly. That's what it will do. So as I said, we understand quite a lot of details about, how precipitation occurs, what goes on in the cloud, how cloud formation, what are the processes that aid cloud formation, all sorts of things. And we have computer models that are able to simulate the process. This is one of the missing links in our knowledge. So once we fill this particular part as well, once we are able to understand this particular part as well, obviously we then we improve our understanding, and that will improve all our models, that will improve our predictions about precipitation. So that's the whole point of the study of the INPs.
Right. And another important detail you speak of in the story is that ETH Zurich plays a key role in this collaboration. So can you briefly walk us through what this India-Switzerland partnership entails?
So ETH Zurich, scientists there are some of the experts on INPs. And this particular center is being set up by the Central University of Jammu in collaboration with the Ministry of Earth Sciences in Delhi. And so, as I said, this monitoring station would do a lot of other things besides the study of INPs. And for the study of INPs, they have tied up with the called Polytechnic ETH Zurich, where some of the scientists have been working on this for a very long time. They have also developed a new equipment. I think it's deployed at very few places, and now Jammu will have one of those, which will facilitate the study of INPs. So that's where the collaboration comes in. So the world experts on the study of INPs, some of them are located in ETH Zurich, and they have a similar station in a place called Jungfrau Joch in Switzerland, in the mountain Alps. Incidentally, I've had the good fortune of visiting that monitoring station as well way back in 2008. So there they carry out similar kind of experiments, and that's what this collaboration is all about.
And lastly, Amitabh, what should be our takeaway from this initiative, especially on India's changing approach to climate science and atmospheric research?
So as we spoke, at the start of this conversation, we have had a fairly wide network of weather monitoring stations. But as we mentioned earlier as well, there are large gaps. The other thing is the weather over this region has lots and lots of variations, and not all of it gets captured very well. And some of the gap areas, as we talked about earlier as well, one gap area is the Himalayas. The other gap area, I would say, is the oceans. Now, we do not have very good data coming in from oceans, and the study of atmosphere, it involves lots of things. You have to have observation over land, you have to have observation over mountains, you have to have observation in the sea, because it's all, it's a dynamic process. The interactions, land, ocean, atmosphere, that's what gives you the weather. And to be able to accurately predict and to be able to understand what's going on, you need to have data from all these places. And India is a fairly large country, lots of variations, surrounded by sea on 2-3 sides. So we need to have much more observation centers. We are also one of the climate hotspots, particularly the Himalayas are one big climate hotspots. So we need to, get more and more data from these places, be able to process this data, improve our understanding so that we are able to deal with the impacts of climate change in a much better manner. The Udhampur monitoring station has to be seen in that sort of context, wherein India is trying to improve its capabilities in terms of weather and climate monitoring, getting more and more data, and improving its understanding of what is going on in the atmosphere, which is influencing the weather over the Indian subcontinent. So that's the bigger objective.
And in the end, we talk about Russia and Ukraine. At least 9 people were killed and over 70 were injured in Kyiv after Russia launched one of its most devastating air attacks on Ukraine in months. Yesterday, the capital, along with Kharkiv and other cities, was hit by waves of drones, ballistic and guided missiles. Explosions began around 1 a.m. local time and continued through the night, accompanied by anti-aircraft fire as Ukrainian defenses attempted to intercept the strikes. Kyiv's mayor Vitaly Klitschko said that rescuers were still pulling out survivors from the rubble. The injured included 6 children and a pregnant woman. Homes, vehicles and other buildings had caught fire and were damaged by falling debris. Post the attack, US President Donald Trump responded to it by saying that he was not happy and asked President Vladimir Putin to stop. Trump wrote in a social media post, quote, "I am not happy with Russian strikes on Kyiv. Not necessary and very bad timing." Unquote. The post came a day after Trump expressed frustration that it was Ukraine's leader who was hampering peace talks on ending Russia's war in Ukraine. Earlier, Ukrainian President Volodymyr Zelensky said that Ukraine does not see strong pressure on Russia anymore, nor new sanctions against Moscow, despite its unwillingness to progress the talks. He said, quote, "We believe that with greater pressure on the Russian Federation, we will be able to bring our sides closer." Unquote. On Wednesday, Trump criticized Zelensky for rejecting any recognition of Russia's occupation of Crimea, warning that such inflammatory remarks could derail efforts to end the war. As far as Ukraine is concerned, its state emergency service said on Telegram, quote, "Russia has launched a massive combined strike on Kyiv. According to preliminary data, 9 people were killed, 63 injured." Unquote. Ukraine's Interior Minister Ihor Klemenko said a major rescue operation was going on in the Sviatoshinsky district. Mobile phones could be heard ringing under the ruins, and that they will continue the search operation until every person has been rescued. You were listening to 3 Things by the Indian Express. Today's episode was edited and mixed by Suresh Pawar and produced by Ichha Sharma and me, Niharika, Nanda. If you like the show, then do subscribe to us wherever you get your podcasts. You can also recommend the show to someone you think will like it. Share it with a friend or someone in your family. It's the best way for people to get to know about us. You can also tweet us at Express Podcast and write to us at podcasts@indianexpress.com.